Hey, what's up? Silas here. So, in this video, I'm going to be doing something that some people could argue is not necessarily a positive thing. If you guys have heard, recently there was a shooting in El Paso, Texas, which is a border town in the state of Texas, in the United States of America, bordering a town in, I think it's Juarez, Mexico, across the border. And there's been a lot of tensions in the United States of America. If you're coming to this video, you're probably somewhat familiar with some of these tensions with immigration, illegal immigration, actual just regular migration, things that happened in the past, things that happen today, what's happening with American culture and things like that. I am personally very interested in that whole sphere of awareness and just nations and countries and traveling. It's been part of my life. It's part of how I was raised, just moving around and trying to understand why are things the way they are right now? Where do people fit in certain cultures? How do the political systems and things like this work? And going further to the point where what gets it to somebody to believe so strongly in whatever they believe in to get to the point where, like this person went out and killed apparent strangers for this situation. At least so far from what's come out, he did not personally know anybody that was shot in there. It seemed he was just shooting random people. I'm probably not going to say the guy's name, but if you want to find that stuff, you can find it. And when it comes to actually, sometimes these happen, these people go out there, they shoot, they kill, and then they get killed themselves in the whole process. But this guy turned himself into the police. In many times, people ask why, how. People seem so shocked. And for me, this might just be because I have an overactive imagination and I just think about a lot of things. Being a creative, I've gone to stories where it's like, if I'm writing a story and there's a character that's female and I'm thinking about this female having a child and being pregnant and giving birth, does that mean I am a female? That doesn't mean I am pregnant. Does that mean I am giving birth? No. That means I'm able to try and be in somebody else's mindset and try to see. If I'm writing about an alien creature that can fly through space and has lived for 1,000 years, doesn't mean I am an alien creature and has flown through space and can live for 1,000 years. So there have been situations where I thought, if I'm writing a horror movie and I'm writing about a serial killer, does that make me a serial killer? And I'm like, no, that means we are able to think things and not actually be those things and do those things. So I've always had this fascination or trying to understand what is it that gets people to actually do the actions that they do. What is it that gets people to help people? What is it that gets people to hurt people? Why do some parents raise their kids in a certain way? Why do some parents think the most positive thing to do for this kid is to hit this kid? And with that in the background, I still am confident that people wake up in the morning and they do things. They wake up in the morning and they say, today, I'm going to do what I consider to be good. Now, that good is very subjective. So, when you have a situation like this, when somebody has committed such evil, in my opinion, and most people's opinions, and people have that question, why, how? This isn't a God works in mysterious ways type of thing, where that's how people normally, something happens and they think, okay, if there's an all good God that could stop this from happening, why did it happen? Oh, because God works in. No, for me, I don't have that fallback. So when you have a situation where somebody has released a manifesto like this, I want to read it. I want to kind of find out. I'd rather know the information and then try to see where that could have gone. Maybe next time I see it in someone, I can say, okay, wait, maybe that was like this other guy. Maybe somebody should have come and said something. Because from the little that I've heard, he posted this on 8chan. They say he was white, he was a supporter of XYZ. So there might be some things in here that I have thought of, that I may even agree with, but I'm not a shooter. There's other people I know who've probably said certain things that this person is going to have in this manifesto that I thought like, okay, wait, I know somebody who's done that, but they're in general a good person. So I think for me, knowing this information is more positive than not knowing. Now, I'm going to start reading out of this. If you feel that this is not something that you want to read or you want to hear, you feel like this is supporting this person, this is carrying on their message, then feel free to stop listening. And if not, here we go. So, This is from, I found it on the federalistpapers.org. I think I'll leave a link below to this location, but I'm just going to jump right into the actual manifesto. I'm not going to go to the short bit of commentary or introduction that they put in the article here. So this is his manifesto. The inconvenient truth. About me. In general, I support the Christchurch shooter and his manifesto. This attack is a response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas. They are the instigators, not me. I am simply defending my country from cultural and ethnic replacement brought by an invasion. Some people will think this statement is hypocritical because of the nearly complete ethnic and cultural destruction brought to the Native Americans by our European ancestors. But this just reinforces my point. The natives didn't take the invasion of the Europeans seriously. And now what's left is just a shadow of what was. My motives to this attack are not at all personal. Actually, the Hispanic community was not my target before I read The Great Replacement. This manifesto will cover the political and economic reasons behind the attack, my gear, my expectations of what response this will generate, and my personal motivations and thoughts. Okay, so that was the intro. That was the initial thing. The Christchurch shooter, I've done a video on that. That was a shooter that live streamed his shooting in a mosque in Christchurch in New Zealand. It's another just insane person. He had a manifesto. I didn't actually read that manifesto. But so he's kind of inspired of that. They talked about at that point, they said this Christchurch shooter, which probably might inspire more people. And then, of course, you're going to have the people jumping in already with the whole like, oh, this is all just some kind of false flags, some kind of conspiracy. This is some thing where people are planning and setting these up so the global government can do this and this. I'm not one who buys that. There's enough people in the world that are going to take this material and be insane enough to go do these things. A lot of the people who claim when it's a shooter, like in this case, oh, this is just the world government doing something, when it's somebody who's like an Islamic terrorist, they say, oh, that's just... But you have to realize these are things, in my opinion, these are things that are coming from this kind of faith, this illogical place, where that's why I'm reading this. I'm trying to understand how is this person going from A plus B plus C equals kill people? How does that get there? Because a lot of people agree with A, a lot of people agree with B, a lot of people agree with C, but they don't. 99.99999999999, and I'm saying 9 like the Hitler thing, don't be Hitler. Most people in the world don't become Hitler. But then I read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and I was reading that, and like, from what's here, you can see the steps that led to Hitler. You can see what happened in the world, and if you had this information, I know hindsight is 2020, but then you could see how he became to this point. There was also other steps where somebody could have come and said, hey, by the way, you're thinking about this in this way, or this happened to you in this way. If you found out that it happened because of X, Y, Z, maybe you wouldn't get to that point of killing people. And I'm hoping by reading some of these things and taking some of this information, we can get to see what are the steps to prevent some things like this from happening. I said some people will think this statement's hypocritical, and he's talking about the Native American thing. Now, this is one thing that I have heard. I've seen the things where this is a common thing. This is a common trait in humanity, this whole situation of it's us or you, me or you, where you have these group identities, and normally when they come in, and you see this in other members of the animal kingdom as human beings are, it's normally a replacement thing. It's normally you come, you move into a new location, and you replace that entire population that was there before. There's some humans have actually even, I don't want to say it's more humane, but it's something that I think war itself has been shown to actually occur in other animals, in animal species, like warrior ants, it's like the chimpanzees and kind of higher apes. They've shown to have some kind of war kind of activities. Insects, other animals have been shown to have that. I don't know if animals have been shown to have concepts of things like slavery or like war prisoners or things like this. There's other things that humans have done to reduce the actual killing off directly of the people. Now, depending on how you identify as a self, you can think like something just like slowly breeding out of a certain person. And this is the thing, I think it comes here with the Great Replacement and that kind of situation where it's not necessarily killing people outright, massacring them, chopping heads off, shooting people, but instead just slowly getting into society and changing the rules, changing ways, changing incentives to get to the point where where one group of people that you think we are this identity, this group is being bred out by this other group. And I talked in a separate video about this where I was saying, okay, if white people are supposedly under one of the claim I've seen in some people, in some race realists, is talking about how there actually isn't genocide going on against white people. And I'm like, is it really a genocide if all you have to do to stop this genocide is find another white person, another person that sufficiently enters that definition of white of yours, and just breed with them? There's nobody actually physically stopping you from breeding. You're saying, oh no, it's being harder for white people to breed and things like this. Like, well, just you can just have more kids if you really think that's it. And there are some people who are doing that, who also are having many kids. But I see these complaints from a lot of people who are not married, who are not having kids. And I'm like, well, if you truly think it's a thing where you're being outbred, how come you're not participating in the whole breeding thing? So, like here we go, the Europeans, invasion of the Europeans. And so he's kind of agreeing in that, saying he's conceding that that actually was an invasion, when some people say it was just part of a regular process. And of course, there's a whole situation where a lot of the wiping out of native populations in the United States of America was done through biological reasons, not biological warfare, because I don't think it was like intentional, like dropping some bomb full of some virus, but it was some situations where they just had lesser resistance to certain diseases that were brought by the Europeans to the what's it called, to the New World, to the Americas. And you had the inverse of it, where when Europeans went to somewhere like Africa, the Africans over there already had very strong, those very strong diseases there that would kill off people who didn't have more of the natural immunities or defenses to those diseases. So I don't know how come in that situation, the things like the flu didn't wipe out large amounts. And there might have been some exchange where the average, I think before immunizations, before the knowledge of disease, of how they were spelled, germs and things like this, before that was really understood, I think the average life expectancy for non-African, non-Negro, non-Sub-Saharan African in the Sub-Saharan landmass was about 3 to 6 weeks, I think, because you just die from diseases, or some tribes people would kill you, some animal, you'd die in some other way. Okay, what else is here in the first part? My gear expectations. So let's just get into this one. The first question is, are gun-free zones less safe? See, like, this is what I'm talking about. In a situation like this, I think it's been shown, and let's see what he says here before we actually get into the thing. I'm just going to read this whole paragraph, and then I'll go back in as I did in the first paragraph, or the first section, and give my thoughts on it. So, are gun-free zones less safe? Political reasons. In short, America is rotting from the inside out, and peaceful means to stop this seem nearly impossible. The inconvenient truth is that our leaders, both Democrat and Republican, have been failing us for decades. They are either complacent or involved in one of the biggest betrayals of the American public in our history: the takeover of the United States government by unchecked corporations. I could write a 10-page essay on all the damage these corporations have caused. But here is what is important. Due to the death of the baby boomers, the increasingly anti-immigrant rhetoric of the right, and the ever-increasing Hispanic population, America will soon become a one-party state. The Democrat Party will allow America as they know, and they know it. The Democrat Party will own America, and they know it. They have already begun the transition by pandering heavily to the Hispanic voting bloc in the first Democratic debate. They intend to use open borders, free healthcare for illegals, citizenship, and more to enact a political coup by importing and then legalizing millions of new voters. With policies like these, the Hispanic support for Democrats will likely become nearly unanimous in the future. The heavy Hispanic population in Texas will make us a Democrat stronghold. Losing Texas and a few other states with heavy Hispanic population to the Democrats is all it would take for them to win nearly every presidential election. Although the Republican Party is also terrible, many factions within the Republican Party are pro-corporation. Pro-corporation equals pro-immigration. But some factions within the Republican Party don't prioritize corporations over our future. So the Democrats are nearly unanimous with their support of immigration, while the Republicans are divided over it. At least with Republicans, the process of mass immigration and citizenship can be greatly reduced. So this question he asked over here, are gun-free zones less safe? It's been shown that most of these mass shootings in the United States of America, the ones that don't happen in the inner city areas that are in general just, you don't know who has a gun, but you find a lot of situations where these targeted mass shooters will go to places that they know are gun-free zones because they understand the people who are abiding by the law will not want to go shoot there. Like, there was this image I saw. Somebody at, I guess, a gun laws protest or something had a sign saying you can't hunt geese with a shot with cartridges with over 3 cartridges. You can't shoot this other animal with this type of shotgun pellet. And then under that they wrote, there are more laws about how you can't shoot geese than there is about shooting children. Like, that kind of mindset is just clownish and absurd to me, because no, it's not that these things are there. People are not saying like it's not a situation of people think it's legal to shoot kids, and if now there's laws saying you can't shoot school children in a certain way, it's what is wrong with people? So when it comes to this kind of argument, when people are talking about these situations, this reason kind of gets thrown out of the window. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to see if we can find some reason and some rationale to why this person did this. Because I think this person did have a mindset that they came to a point where they thought, this is what I'm going to do. And I don't know about El Paso, Texas, but I know you can have like concealed carry in certain places. I don't know if that was a concealed carry area. I don't know if the Walmart or the area itself. From what I saw, nobody actually shot back at him. There was no gunfight. It was just him, unfortunately, shooting down people. And it was 20 dead, about 26 injured. Okay, so in short, America is rotting from the inside. So both Democrat and Republican. This two-party system in the United States of America where people say there's not too big of a difference, two sides of the same coin, and they've been going back and forth. And I think currently with President Donald Trump getting in and seeing the effect of it's had on the political landscape, where the Republicans, there was many people in the Republicans who were like, never Trump, I'm never going to vote for Trump, and they still have their divisions. You're seeing divisions happening in the Democratic Party. Right now, as he talked about here in the Democratic debate, you saw them come out and just blatantly embrace this whole identity politics, and they're like, the Hispanics are ours, the blacks are ours, the gays are ours, and they're getting it down to this point. And what has happened with quote unquote white people is a lot of them have said, okay, if these groups are going to have this in-group preference, then we're going to form our in-groups as well and then have our in-group preference. Even though there's been Irish Americans, Italian Americans, there's been Greek Americans, there's been Germanic Americans. So there's been other cultures and identities within quote unquote white people, European descendants. And you see that kind of, for some people, those lines where you ask, okay, who is really the same? Well, because you've had this kind of situation where I've seen arguments where earlier on people were talking about, oh, this workplace has somebody from Germany, somebody from Greece, somebody from Portugal, somebody from Spain, and now we talk about the Hispanic people. The Hispanic people are called Hispanic, I guess, more because of the language they speak in Latin America, but a lot of the people in Latin America are generations away from people that came from Spain, and Spain itself is European. So if you're saying we're kind of for the Spanish people, then is it really the Spanish people? The Spanish people in South America, are they the same as, let's say, somebody who's been here, who's been intermarrying into German families in the United States of America for the same hundreds of years? Does that count? Are they also European Americans, European South Americans? Are they okay? And then the ones who are mixed with the local populations, are they off? So there's this kind of situations, these questions that come with that kind of situation of what happens when you have these in-groups and you have these kind of preferences that people go with. So for me, it's kind of been hard for me to glom onto, to feel like I can identify personally with that larger group identity, that collective kind of thing where it's like, yes, I'm part of this larger group, because I think it's in part due to my upbringing, moving around to different continents, different cultures, different places, where I'm like, okay, do I really fit in with these people? Do I really buy into this? I'm trying to just have a situation where I am my lived experiences and my knowledge and my awareness and things like that, where the things that happened in the past don't really have much to do with me. The things that will happen in the future may have something to do with me in some ways of how I can pass on my ideas and my actions, how they can affect things in the past, I mean, in the future. But that's still not directly me. I'm not going to be like, oh, son, daughter, or whatever, you have to carry on some kind of legacy that I have. I'm not going to put that on them. I'm going to try to have them be, if I do happen to be a parent, or what I try to advise people, what I think would be positive, to create individuals that can be a part of a larger group, but they have their responsibility, they have their agency, they live their life in um, that kind of independent way, but they can actually go in and be a part of something greater, but not have the shame or feeling that they have to have either guilt of things of the past. They feel like, okay, if I did something to somebody else as a kid, my child shouldn't have to have guilt at me insulting this person or doing something wrong to that person. They shouldn't carry that guilt, but they should also feel, if I did something positive, they feel like, oh, my dad did this, so that means I'm awesome. It's like, no, you try to do what you can do on your own at the same point. Because if you say no to the white guilt of the past, then you also can't say yes to the white pride of the things that supposed white people, Europeans, did in the past. So yeah, I think the whole identity politics thing is very, very damaging. And this whole idea of the corporation, the anti-corporation things here, I think you have to look at what is a corporation today. The amount of power that certain corporations exert is due to the state. Without the state, you couldn't have monopolies. You couldn't have a situation where some company can have such a stranglehold on a certain market, where competitors have the cost of entry for competitors is set so high. The laws and regulations and rules they have to follow, the amount of taxes they have to pay, the amount of hoops they have to jump through is so high that it gets to a situation where one company can just get to the position of power, then they can just hire lobbyists. The lobbyists go to the state, and then the state kind of gets laws that are more favorable for that company to maintain. Because it gets to the whole situation where, if there's a certain situation where your profits are 300 million, as long as you can pay lobbyists 299 999 to the infinite million, and you get that 0.000001 profit, you're still profiting. So it's a lot more profitable for companies to actually hire lobbyists and spend millions on them to maintain their hundreds of millions of dollars of actual profit. So it gets to a situation where, the same way it's a lot easier for the government to have money, the state to have money kind of concentrated in a few people, and then tax those few people, get their resources from those few people, versus having those monies spread around. Like, it's okay. Look, if you need to get $100, it's easier to tax one person who's making $1,000 10% and get that $100 from that person than it would be to tax 100 people who are making $10 a person. How much would you have to ask them? 10% again? Then you'd get that $1 from each of those people. So it's a lot easier to have, the state has no problem with having money concentrated in small groups of people that they are aware of, that they have control of. And then those small group of people also get the benefit of knowing, if we can control these small people, these people that we know in the government. So it creates this symbiotic relationship where they're kind of working with each other, and you see that switch between the private sector and the public sector, where they're kind of working together. Officials and members kind of go back and forth, and they just have these comfy relationships because they understand it's to their mutual benefit to stay in power, to have a small amount of people holding this power. So when you look at the situation, you're talking about corporations, I don't necessarily think you can look at things without understanding the mutating effect that the state has had in being able to have a monopoly on violence in any given area. They are the ones who have that concentration of violence. It's in other people's interest to curry favor with those people to get more favorable results for themselves. and it creates an unnatural environment. So I think when you focus so much on the corporation instead of the state that's behind it, in my opinion, it's kind of damaging, and you see things like this. So when you talk about the differences between the parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, I think what we saw in the last 2016 presidential election was how much of a uni-party it actually is. How much it's those people that are established, that are comfortable with the way things are going, and they want to just maintain their power, and how many people actually try to question what's going on there. Now, even when you have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who I've mentioned in previous videos, who's somebody who's, they say is extreme, but I'm like, no, they're just very honest about what they're doing. And they're not politically savvy enough or don't care enough or they've been put up enough where they think, I'm just going to tell them like it is. I'm just going to really tell them what I want, what we're trying to get here. So instead of kind of being sly about it and then telling you one thing and then doing another behind your back, they're just like, this is what we want to do. And they're at the point where they think like, look, this is what we want to do. And I think people are okay enough to just hear what we want to do and let's just get to it. So people can really see what's going on there. People can really see the kind of growth of the state. Do people really want the growth of the state? Do they really want socialism? Do they really want communism? And then how many of the people on the other side, do they really want a smaller state? Are they willing to actually risk and say like, this is not what we want. We're actually going to risk personal injury and personal relations and our jobs and things like this in order to actually stand up for these ideas and things that we actually have in mind. And this is another thing that I'm talking about with this. This person believed enough in what he said to actually go out there and shoot people over it and possibly have himself be shot and killed over it. Yet you have people who say they're very strongly supportive of certain things, but they won't even bring it up with their supposed loved ones, their supposed closest friends and family. They won't even just have an uncomfortable conversation with them. Okay, so one last thing on this first paragraph, this first section of political reasons, the second section of political reasons. When you write here, I could write a 10-page essay on the damage that these corporations have caused, but here's what's important. I wish he would write a 10-page essay. Put that out there. Because a lot of times when people say, oh, I could say more about this, when you actually ask them to say more, they can't. Because I think when you actually try to look for that 10-page essay and find that it's corporations, you have to define what a corporation is. I think you'll start realizing that it's not necessarily just the corporation. There's a grander scheme of this. And this is how it is for me. I've had a lot of time on my hands to look into certain things. And when I look into it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is behind it. And just kind of follow the steps in that way and kind of see what goes with that. Okay, now on to the next section. Economic reasons. In short, immigration can only be detrimental to the future of America. Continued immigration will make one of the biggest issues of our time, automation, so much worse. Some sources say that in under 2 decades, half of American jobs will be lost to it. Of course, some people will be retained, but most will not. So it makes no sense to keep on letting millions of illegal or legal immigrants flood into the United States, and to keep the tens of millions that are already here. Invaders who also have close to the highest birth rate of all ethnicities in America. In the near future, America will have to initiate a basic universal income to prevent widespread poverty and civil unrest as people lose those jobs. He said some things in here that I feel I should address. This is a longer section, so let me just address this right now, and then I'll get back to where it was. This the whole idea of automation. This has become a religion for people. It's more a religious kind of idea, where it's a religious experience and feeling for them. These people do feel like they are warriors for some greater need, some greater power, some collective kind of good that they're out there. And they just throw out these demons things, like automation in this sense. With the whole automation thing, universal basic income here, I've seen some of this. I was going on with the whole like Andrew Yang memes. Andrew Yang is a candidate for the Democratic presidential election and presidential nomination to run for the president of the United States of America in 2020. And he has this whole thing with UBI saying he's going to guarantee everybody $1,000 a month. And he talks about, he's railing against automation. Automation is going to steal our jobs. They take our jobs. It's like, no, people don't understand. Like, one of the main things that I've heard about this being talked about, the ma pa shops and the truckers, when people don't realize that 99.9% of the goods that these truckers actually move around would be gone if you actually took automation away. I recently released a video about this video I saw was these three men pushing this mkokoteni, which is this kind of caravan, this cart thing, and I've had constant reminders in my life about how much automation actually saves time, how much automation is actually used in our lives. I still get in the situation where I'm at the point right now I'm still washing my clothes by hand. And people don't understand just a simple thing like just having a washing machine that's an automated process to put your clothes in and you can go do whatever else during that time and even have the electricity. There's just so much automation is already involved in people's lives that for you to point out that, okay, now the automation coming is the one that we need to fight back against because it's going to take our jobs. It's like, no. When that automation comes, when we moved from horse-drawn carriages to vehicles, yes, the people who had the stables, the people who were delivering hay, the people who the what's called the blacksmiths that were making horseshoes, the people that were making the wagons, all those people went out of business. But then it opened so many different markets, so many new industries to supply the needs that people had with vehicles, because people still needed to get from point A to B in a faster way than just walking. So now they'd moved from horses, now they created this whole new industry to service that. So yes, are people going to stop needing food now that the trucks come? No. When those trucks come, when those automated vehicles come, those people will be freed up to do other things with their time. And just in general, there's so many time-saving things that happen. So it kind of gets to this point where when people have these fears of the future when it comes to things like automation, they're looking at if the world stays exactly like it is today, then in the future, if all these jobs are gone because they're being done by robots, then where would all these people do? We don't know what's going to be opened up by all these other jobs coming in. And again, another influence here that I've seen is the influence of the state on this. Some of these situations, the state itself has created these companies, has created these false, this whole supporting these false incentives, not letting other people be competitive enough to enter in slowly, not getting a situation where the actual, something like simply setting a minimum wage so people will say, okay, this minimum wage, this union, this protected industry is going to collect enough people funneling towards that industry because it's no longer competitive. There's better ways of doing it. But due to state involvement and regulation and laws and rules and things like that, preventing these other people from coming in and challenging this market that already has this power, it's going to keep this market stronger and stronger and stronger. It's going to prop this market up to the point where once it collapses, there's so many people involved in it that it takes down a lot more people. Whereas you could have a slower kind of process, a more natural process where other people are coming in, these other companies are trying out and testing out new things and things like that. Then slowly by slowly you have people switching, then people are like, okay, maybe I don't have to enter this market, I can try out these upstarts. Because those upstarts don't really come up in the current environment that you have with the state enabling these monopolies and these concentrations of power in certain places that may not be actually market tested and working to the actual realities and adjusting and flexible and growing with adjusting with the new forms of technology. These are things that you see where it limits the actual transition from one to another. So that's just something that I've thought of on automation. Should get into it deeper in a different video. But even just like the road system, the road system itself that was built to have, I think, ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, being able to be shipped around the United States of America. That was part of what the highway system was built for to do. Now those roads were there. Once that was a government, it was a state project, it was a government project. You can't roll back on it. Once it's created, you have to find reasons to actually keep it that way. Maybe that actually altered the way cities developed, the way people settled in different areas, now using those trucks and using those things and giving a reason for the whole road system to be maintained that way, for the government to have a Department of Transportation and all this kind of stuff and have some say on that. And that kind of slowly changes the way people live, the way people get their products, the way you have cities of supposedly the best places in the world that would run out of food if cut off from trucks in a week. That's not natural. Why would people want to willingly go live in an area where if you didn't have some kind of extra food, you'd die off in a week? It doesn't make any sense with some of these things. Anyway, back into this. Joblessness in itself is a source of civil unrest. The less dependence on government welfare system, the better. The lower the unemployment rate, the better. Achieving Achieving ambitions. Okay, it says achieving ambitions, social projects, specifically ambitious. Achieving ambitions, social projects like universal healthcare and UBI would become far more likely to succeed if tens of millions of dependents are removed. Wait, what? Um, okay, this is another thing that I've seen. A lot of people who are in this, I guess this guy would, you would consider this guy more politically right to say this is assault right type of people, where they are supportive of socialist tendencies. A lot of these people talk about how, oh, it's like, no, it's not the state. Oh, we want smaller government, this and this. It's lip service to that thing. Because you see, they also talk about, oh, we, these European kind of history and culture that they're taking back. But you look at the European cities, European cultures, European countries that they're talking about, and they're a lot more socialist. They're a lot more welfare state. There's a lot more redistributive policies in a lot of those countries that these people take pride in. So it's not necessarily that we're against this redistributive kind of ideas of state force coming in and taking money away from people who earned it and spreading it to people who haven't earned that money. It's just the people that it's being taken from and the people it's being spread to that they're more kind of interested and angry about. Okay, so back into this. Even though new migrants do the dirty work, their kids typically don't. They want to live the American dream, which is why they get college degrees and fill higher paying skilled positions. This is why corporations lobby for even more illegal immigration, even after decades of it happening. Okay, there's some typos in this. They need to keep replenishing the low-skilled labor pool. Even as migrant children flood skilled jobs, corporations make this worse by lobbying for even more work visas to be issued for skilled foreign workers to come here. Recently, the Senate, under Republican administration, has greatly increased the number of foreign workers that will take American jobs. Remember that both Democrats and Republicans support immigration and work visas. Corporations need to keep replenishing the labor pool for both skilled and unskilled jobs to keep the wages down. So automation is a good thing, as it will eliminate the need for new migrants to fill unskilled jobs. Jobs that Americans can't survive on anyway. Automation can and would replace millions of low-skilled jobs if immigrants were deported. This source of competition for skilled labor for immigrants and visa holders around the world has made a very difficult situation even worse for the natives as they compete in the skilled job market. There's so much nonsense. So much nonsense in this. So this is the kind of situation where it's like, yes, you can make points, but what's the connection between these points? You know, things are correlated does not necessarily mean causation. And you see this a lot. This cherry picking things here and there. You see this again, the confusion of just saying all immigration is the same. The situation of talking about how these people are anti-American, anti-culture, they don't want the American dream. So is it bad? First of all, I would rather people focus on the American reality than the American dream. I don't think dreams are actually a positive thing to actually live on. They can inspire you to something, but when you get to the actual reality, I wish people would focus on that more. Because he's saying the American dream is okay for Americans because Americans themselves voted in the kind of government and policies before there was such great amounts of immigration that are kind of leading to the point where the welfare state is to the point where they're actually attracting so many people. The incentive for people to come to the United States of America is so high because of the because of the bait that they're giving out. They're giving out these welfare things for the vote. So that's there. But who was that voted in? If the country was supposedly more white in the past, then aren't those white people the same ones who voted in these kind of systems? You're talking about the socialist policy, you're talking about the communist policies. These things weren't invented in Africa. They weren't invented in Asia. They weren't invented in Latin America. These things were invented in Europe and brought over to the United States of America and accepted and voted for by large amounts of this supposed white population that this guy seems to want to be brought back. Then when you talk about the natives here, what does make someone native? How far do you have to go to be native? So what it's kind of confusing, this kind of situation where they talk about the Native Americans, talk about the native tribes. So all of a sudden you're native. How long do you have to be living in a location to be native to that location? Just because you're born in a country, does that make you native of that location? If you're a native of Georgia and then you move all of a sudden to San Francisco or to North Dakota, and you take a job there in North Dakota, have you displaced a native North Dakotan? Should you be prevented from traveling to that place because, oh, in Georgia, that's where you're supposed to have your job? It's just so much mess when you kind of think about things in this way. Again, just a mix of all kinds of immigration being the same, because I've heard some people on the political right talk about, oh, it's terrible when people on the Democrat side just talk about the same thing. They're like, oh, we just want these illegal immigrants, and they talk about, oh, Trump is anti-migration, or the Republicans are anti-this, and then people on the political right complain and they say, oh, why are these Democrats always confusing illegal immigrants and illegal immigration and legal migration? And it's like, no, 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 no. A lot of people do this. As you can see, this person, don't know where he sits on the political spectrum. As he said, he has issues with both Democrats and Republicans, but I think he would personally consider himself more on the political right. And you can see he's kind of conflating the two as well. See, and then here he comes and supports automation. It's a good thing to eliminate those jobs. This whole the whole thing on the political right to say he's going to do jobs that Americans want to, and I previously asked the thing like, just so much frustration and annoyance in this kind of situation. Okay, so to compete, people will have to get better credentials by spending more time in college. It used to be that a high school degree was worth something. Now, a bachelor's degree is what's recommended to be competitive in the job market. The cost of college degrees has exploded and their value plummeted. This has led to a generation of indebted, overqualified students filling menial, low-paying and unfulfilling jobs. Of course, these migrants and their children have contributed to the problem, but are not the sole cause of it. The American lifestyle affords our citizens an incredible quality of life. However, our lifestyle is destroying the environment of our country. The decimation of the environment is creating a massive burden for future generations. Corporations are heading the destruction of our environment by shamelessly overharvesting resources. This has been a problem for decades. For example, this phenomenon is brilliantly portrayed in the decades-old classic, The Lorax. Watersheds around the country, especially in agriculture areas, are being depleted. Fresh water is being polluted from farming and oil drilling operations. Consumer culture is creating thousands of tons of unnecessary plastic waste and electronic waste, and recycling to help slow this down is almost non-existent. Urban sprawl creates inefficient cities, which unnecessarily destroys millions of acres of land. We even use God knows how many trees worth of paper towels just to wipe water off our hands. Everything I have seen and heard in my short life has led me to believe that the average American isn't willing to change their lifestyle, even if the changes only cause a slight inconvenience. The government is unwilling to tackle these issues beyond empty promises, since they are owned by corporations. Corporations that also like immigration because more people means a bigger market for their products. I just want to say that I love the people of this country, but goddamn, most of y'all are too stubborn to change your lifestyle. So the next logical step is to decrease the number of people in America using resources. If we can get rid of enough people, then our way of life can become sustainable. So that's the end of this section, and let me give my thoughts on some of the things that were discussed here. As you see, he went into some things where I was talking about how some people seem to have issues with the country, but are not willing to even have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody they claim to care about, they claim to love over these things. And this guy seemed to have some same frustration with that. It hasn't driven me to get to the point where I'm going to go shoot somebody, but this person somehow in his mind, he went to something else. Now, he's talking about the cities, and I was also wondering, is this truly a natural way cities were supposed to develop? Or is it more affected due to the policies and things like that, the incentives people have in certain areas, the fact that the government owns so much of the land out there, the government of the United States of America, and states all over the world seem to own so much land, yet it's actually in the United States Constitution that you're not supposed to have that there. I guess some governments will have it in a different situation, but that's a different kind of structure of country, supposedly. Now you get to that situation where they're talking about it's inefficient. Now, with the whole situation of how do certain companies don't have a more streamlined process of using certain things, and I think, again, that's part of the state influence. The fiat currency has gotten to the point where currency, money itself, has been devalued, where I think there's a lot more money in the world, money wise, once you left the gold standard, or you left some kind of actual standard where it's actually pegged on a physical thing, where if you owned all the money in the world, you could buy all the products in the world, all the goods in the world, multiple times over. So you have people using things beyond their actual capacity to, they're using things in a natural way. It's not too realistic. You don't actually have actual figures and numbers to give you a more practical and a more efficient use of your time and energy. You personally know, like, what are you personally going to do with your physical time? You know you have the 24 hours in a day and you can do something. So if you're using your own direct physical resources to put in your physical manpower, your muscles and your motive power to actually do something, I think you treat it differently than if it's just like on a computer. It was just something you could just put in these numbers and you have this different attachment to it. And they have the whole idea of just think about it this way. If you actually use cash, this has been found in different tests. If you actually use cash, $20 itself, the physical money, and hand it over to somebody, it's different than just giving them a card or just sending something digitally. For me, I think I've gotten to the point where I have more of an understanding for it. Maybe since I haven't earned that much money, so I have a different kind of relationship with the whole situation. But for most people, if you're detached from it, if it's just these kind of theoretical numbers, you get to use it in a different way. And then you're also not as accountable for your losses. There's ways to kind of, the system has backstopped you. This too big to fail type of situations. Oh, this company must stay up because it has to be held up for our society. We have to find ways to maintain these jobs and things like this so we can get the votes from these unions and things like that, when that company itself may have been shown to be inefficient. But because the government, the people in a certain area benefit, this state itself is the one that builds this thing. We have to find a way to prop up this industry. Then you get a situation where you have these mutated kind of corporations that are going out there and not working in as positive a way I think that they could with the society, with the culture, with the environment. What else was talked about in here that's worth discussing? Again, just a mix of things. And you can see some of the things here. I don't want to say it's outright talking points, but some of the things here are more on the political left, some of the things on the political right. So this guy seems to be cherry picking or picking on different kind of ideas. He has the environmental concerns here, which is that's more concerning the political left, with a Green New Deal from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other people and things like that, where they're more an environmentalist type of thing. And I think, as I said, there's some things here that are some concerns. But what makes this information concerning enough to go out and shoot people for? Okay, now here we go. Gear. Main gun, AK-47 WAS R10. I realized pretty quickly that this isn't a great choice since it's a civilian version of the AK-47. It's only designed to shoot rounds. It's not designed to shoot rounds quickly, so it overheats massively after about 100 shots fired in quick succession. I'll have to use a heat-resistant glove to get around this. 8mm 3 bullet or 8M3 bullet. This bullet, unlike pretty much any other 7.62 by 39 bullet, actually fragments like a pistol hollow point when shot out of the AK-47 at the cost of penetration. Penetration is still reasonable, but not as high as a normal AK-47 bullet. The AK-47 is definitely a bad choice without this bullet design and may still be worth it. Other gun, if I get one, it's an AR-15. Pretty much any variation of this gun doesn't heat up nearly as fast as the AK-47. The round of this gun is designed to fragment, but instead tumbles inside a target, causing lethal wounding. This gun is probably better, but I wanted to explore different options. The AR-15 is probably the best gun for military applications, but this isn't a military application. This will be a test which is more lethal. Either it's fragmentation or tumbling. I didn't spend much time at all preparing for this attack, maybe a month, probably less. I have to do this before I lose my nerve. I figured that an underprepared attack and a manifesto is better than no attack and no manifesto. And a manifesto. So he's saying himself that this manifesto is not as in-depth as he wrote earlier, that he could do 10. do a 10-page paper so he could have gone to more detail on some of these things. And maybe that's some of the questions I'm asking. Maybe he had more of a thought process that would fill out some of these things. But that's, again, just to be able to sit down and think this, because I've read books, read things where people go into these kind of research to as creators, to write a book about something like this, you go into this kind of research, but to actually see it written out and then the person actually go out and do it, it's really, really quite a thing. I actually been to a gun range once, fired both the AK-47 and an AR-15 at that situation. And with me in the United States of America, I think the guns are there. I do think if you have the option of being as protected as you can, as have that gun possibly on you to protect you from the few lunatics that are out there, I think it's more positive to have one. I think I would be more comfortable living in the United States of America if I lived in a place where I could be armed in case somebody tries to come and challenge me. And it's also a situation where I know that guns themselves have been used to protect people a lot more than they have to kill people in these situations. You don't hear about the situations where a crime was prevented. Somebody didn't lose their life, somebody wasn't raped, somebody wasn't assaulted, the house wasn't burglarized because somebody had a gun and stopped the other person. You don't hear that as much as this. And I still think that's a positive thing. We should hear the negative things more than we hear the positive things, because the positive things should be more natural. It should be the way things happen. There was 13 hours after this, there was also another shooting in, where was it? Dayton, Ohio. 9 people were killed. The cops showed up pretty fast and took the shooter down. But a few weeks before, there was, I think, a bigger shooting in somewhere in California. It was a garlic festival that didn't get as much, I think, TV play because of probably the demographics involved in that. I think, like, why do some stories get the things? And maybe it's a manifesto, maybe it's like information on it. And there was another shooting, I think, in the area where it was like black on black violence that didn't get really much play. But this one is getting its play so far. So, messed up situation with some of these things. Okay, I think we're getting towards the end here. So, reaction. Statistically, millions of migrants have returned to their home countries to reunite with a family that they lost contact with when they moved to America. They come here as economic migrants, not for asylum reasons. This is an encouraging sign that the Hispanic population is willing to return to their home countries if given the right incentive. An incentive that myself and many other patriotic Americans will provide. This will remove the threats of Hispanic voting bloc, which will make up for the loss of millions of baby boomers. This will also make the elites that run corporations realize that it's not in their interest to continue to piss off Americans. Corporate America doesn't need to be destroyed, but just shown that they're on the wrong side of history. That if they don't bend, they will break. So, again, wrong side of history. This is something I've seen being mocked a lot by people on the political right, saying, oh, these people on the left always talking about the wrong side of history. But no, it's a religious thing. It's a faith-based thing. People on the political right have their own faith-based things. You're seeing this person talking about this. Where does he stand on the political spectrum? You know, because the right side of history, now some people on the political left say that a lot. Some people on the political right object to that. The saying of that thing, calling that thing as a thing to say. But people on the political right, I think, would agree more with his stance on immigration than people on the political left. So you have this situation where I'm glad I actually came out and read this. So let me know what you guys are thinking. This guy seems all over the place. But is he all over the place because we have this idea that you can only be on this side or this side? Are we more comfortable with having these clear delineations between these things instead of understanding that there's a mix with this? When I'm seeing more just logical, confused, faith-based, jumping around thinking instead of just following the rational ways of doing things. Because how is this person going to, is he actually thinking it's going to be some major uprising? And some people have been talking about this. Some people have been talking about how there's a war coming, there's a civil war coming, where people are going to be shooting other people. And I've always asked people, what do you actually think is going to happen? How violent and how active do you think this situation could possibly be? And he seems to be hinting at this action happening a lot more than it would be. And for me, I don't really see it getting to the point where this is a common thing to occur. And even though some of the figures, the way they keep statistics of shootings, it seems to be going up, but I think some of the things they consider part of mass shootings, I think a mass shooting is considered if at least four people are killed or injured by one shooter in one situation, that's considered a mass shooting. So this could be a situation where somebody kills their kids. I've also been listening to true crime things. It's really messed up things. But if you kill three people and then you kill yourself, it's a domestic situation. Maybe like there's some kind of that would be considered a mass shooting. Or if you have a situation where I think I saw some kind of absurd story was talked about where it was like somebody like if you're in a drive-by shooting and then you shoot at one person, but then three, or you shoot at one person, injuring that person, and the bullets you're shooting end up hitting three other people. That's considered a mass shooting. It's kind of it's not necessarily as clear cut as you'd say, and I think the lunatics who do these things are gladly a lot fewer because, as I've talked about here, I think a lot of people have agreed with and thought of many of the things that have been said in this manifesto, but they're still not going to get to the point to actually go out there and shoot somebody and plan this and write this and do this. Okay. It's a weird person. Okay, personal reasons and thoughts. Okay, one more thing here. It's talking about the economic immigrants don't come for asylum reason. That one is one thing I do agree. Majority of the immigrants who do come to the United States, the legal immigrants coming through the southern border with the United States of America, and people overstaying visas and things like that, are not there for asylum reasons. They're not coming for that kind of situation. Even though there's that thing President Trump said that some countries are shithole countries, if you have people on the political left saying, no, those countries are not shitholes, they're amazing, they're great countries. But then these people are coming for asylum. Like, okay, are those countries great? If those countries are great, then why would the people be leaving for asylum? You don't leave from asylum from a great place. Most people are literally just coming because they can earn more. There's a promise of them earning more in the United States of America. And then recently, President Trump, United States of America, has set up agreements with Mexico and Guatemala saying we're not going to give your countries aid. These are one of the ways he did. We're not going to give your countries aid if you keep letting these immigrants, these caravans of people just pass through your country. So now those countries and other ways of incentivizing these other countries to actually defend their borders and say we're not just going to let these people go through go through our borders and go to the United States of America. We're either going to hold them in those countries or we're going to prevent them from entering because Mexican southern border is still rather well policed. But it gets a situation where I just watched a news story, a short news piece on some migrants from Central America. I think it was Honduran migrants. Something with it going back to Honduras. Anyway, it was some migrants that came up to the United States of America and were sent back to Mexico because now there's this new law saying Mexico is going to hold these people in Mexico until they can actually have their asylum application heard. And that could be a month to years. Whereas when they were brought to the United States of America, there wasn't enough holding space to have these people. First, for the people you actually catch, you couldn't actually hold them. And then what they would do, they would be caught. They would be registered. They would say you have to come back in X amount of time, this many months, to have your hearing. And they would go off into the American population and just disappear. So now that these people are being brought back in Mexico and kept there, the guy was like, oh, actually, I'm going to go back to Honduras or wherever I'm from because I thought you were going to come here and have these opportunities, but now that I've found out that they're not. So once you take away those incentives for them to come, I think a lot of people will just stay where they are and try to work it out in that kind of place. So I think I'm not against the idea where I do think there are incentives that are incentivizing people to cross the border and come across. People aren't doing that because they think they're going to have a worse time. People don't do things, like I said, people don't do things because they think it's wrong. They don't do things in general and think they're going to hurt themselves. They do things because for the greater good or for a more positive idea. Some people do things to be on the right side of history. They say, I'm going to take this damaging now, this separation from my family now for this time, so I can walk these thousands of miles, get to the United States of America. And once I'm there, I'll be able to build up my life and then maybe send some money back, maybe eventually have my family brought over. There's a lot of reasons people do it. Like I'm saying, I'm not giving an idea of is it legal, is it illegal, is it good, is it wrong, but I'm saying the person themselves are doing these things because they think in their understanding of what's good, they're doing something that's good. So are there ways to take away to change that calculus that they have in their mind to receive this is a good idea? Yes. If it's a simple thing where it's like, look, you have to have actual employment. If you're illegal, you'll get deported. You'll be caught and deported easily. That's a thing, and then you'll be prevented from coming in. Because that's for me with my travel to the United States of America. I know if you don't apply for a visa, if you overstay your visa, you can get banned for 10 years. That's if you're following the legal process. Just the same way how people say with the gun situation, you make guns illegal. The criminals are still going to use guns because they don't care about the law. They're going to go in there and still shoot people and still hold the guns. So when you're law abiding, you're affected by a different kind of calculus in your mind. Because the punishment, this is just at least from the country that I'm from, I think it applies to most countries. If you overstay your visa or if you break the whole laws in that situation legally, you're normally banned for at least 10 years. So that's not something that I'd want to risk. I'd be like, I'd rather go through the process, as convoluted as it may be, as unnecessary as I might think it is. It's the law, so I'm going to follow that for now and try to get in that way. Okay, on to the last section. Personal reasons and thoughts. My whole life, I have been preparing for a future that currently doesn't exist. The job of my dreams will likely be automated. Hispanics will take control of the local state government of my beloved Texas, changing policy to better suit their needs. They will turn Texas into an instrument of a political coup which will hasten to the destruction of our country. The environment is getting worse by the year. If you take nothing else from this document, remember this: inaction is a choice. I can no longer bear the shame of inaction, knowing that our founding fathers have endowed me with the rights needed to save our country from the brink of destruction. I think it's supposed to be brink of destruction. Our European comrades don't have the rights needed to repel the millions of invaders that plague that country. They have no choice but to sit by and watch their countries burn. America can only be destroyed from the inside out. If our country falls, it will be the fault of traitors. This is why I see my actions as faultless. Because this act isn't an act of imperialism, but an act of preservation. America is full of hypocrites who will blast my actions as the sole result of racism and hatred of other countries, despite the extensive evidence of all the problems these invaders cause and will cause. People who are hypocrites because they support imperialistic wars that have caused the loss of tens of thousands of American lives and untold numbers of civilian lives. The argument that mass murder is okay when it is state-sanctioned is absurd. Our government has killed a whole lot more people for a whole lot less. Even if other non-immigrant targets... Okay, I'm going to get into the last section now. Personal reasons and thoughts. My whole life I've been preparing for a future that currently doesn't exist. The job of my dreams will likely be automated. Hispanics will take control of the local state government of my beloved Texas, changing policy to better suit their needs. They will turn Texas into an instrument of a political coup, which will hasten the destruction of our country. The environment is getting worse by the year. If you take nothing else from this document, and remember this. If you take nothing else from this document, remember this: inaction is a choice. I can no longer bear the shame of inaction, knowing that our founding fathers have endowed me with the rights needed to save our country from the brink of destruction. Our European comrades don't have the gun rights needed to repel the millions of invaders that plague their country. Plague their country, it's supposed to be plague. They have no choice but to sit by and watch their countries burn. America can only be destroyed from the inside out. If our country falls, it will be the fault of traitors. This is why I see my actions as faultless. Because this isn't an act of imperialism, but an act of preservation. America is full of hypocrites who will blast my actions as the sole result of racism and hatred of other countries, despite the extensive evidence of all the problems that these invaders cause and will cause. People who are hypocrites because they support imperialistic wars that have caused the loss of tens of thousands of American lives and untold numbers of civilian lives. The argument that mass murder is okay when it is state-sanctioned is absurd. Our government has killed a whole lot more people for a whole lot less. Even if other non-immigrant targets would have had a greater impact, I can't bring myself to kill my fellow Americans. Even the Americans that seem hell-bent on destroying our country, even if they are shameless race mixers, massive polluters, haters of our collective values, etc. One day they will see the error of their ways. Either when American patriots fail to reform our country and it collapses, or when we save it. But they will see the error of their ways. I promise you all that. I promise you all that. I am against race mixing because it destroys genetic diversity and creates identity problems. Also because it's completely unnecessary and selfish. Second and third generation Hispanics form interracial unions at much higher rates than average. Yet another reason to send them back. Cultural and racial diversity is largely temporary. Cultural diversity diminishes as stronger and or more appealing cultures overtake weaker and or undesirable ones. Racial diversity will disappear as either race mixing or genocide will take place. But the idea of deporting or murdering all non-white Americans is horrific. Many have been here at least as long as whites and have done as much to build our country. The best solution to this, for now, would be to divide America into a confederacy of territories with at least one territory for each race. This physical separation would nearly eliminate race mixing and improve social unity by granting each race self-determination within their respective territories. My death is likely inevitable. If I'm not killed by the police, then I'll probably be gunned down by one of the invaders. Capture in this case is far worse than dying during the shooting because I'll get the death penalty anyway. Worse still is that I would live knowing that my family despises me. This is why I'm not going to surrender even if I run out of ammo. If I'm captured, it will be because I was subdued somehow. Remember, it is not cowardly to pick low-hanging fruit, aka don't attack heavily guarded areas to fulfill your super soldier Call of Duty fantasy, COD fantasy. Attack low security targets. Even though you might outgun a security guard or a policeman, they'll likely beat you in armor, training, and numbers. Do not throw away your life on an unnecessary dangerous target. If targets seem too hot, live to fight another day. My ideology has not changed for several years. My opinions on automation, immigration, and the rest predate Trump and his campaign for president. I'm putting this here because some people will blame the president or certain presidential candidates for the attack. This is not the case. I know the media will probably call me a white supremacist anyway and blame Trump's rhetoric. The media is infamous for fake news. The reaction to this attack will likely just confirm that. Many people think that the fight for America is already lost. They couldn't be more wrong. This is just the beginning for the fight of America and Europe. I am honored to head the fight to reclaim my country from destruction. So that's it. And as you can see, he says here he's not going to be captured. He was captured. I don't think he was even shot at. But that's the thing. You can't take everything some of these crazy people say seriously. Let me not just say he's crazy. He could have just been sane and just very confused. So he's not somebody who sees. He's not thinking. This is the thing. When you look at someone like this and you say, how could somebody do this? Because you can't imagine doing this. You have to try and imagine not being like your average person, because your average person wouldn't do what he did to begin with. So how does your non-average mentality look at something like this as an explanation for what he does? I mean, I definitely would be interested to see what his childhood was like, or if he went through different kinds of abuse, what his mentality was like. There's so much mess in here. He mentions Call of Duty here. Did he think it was like a video game? Then when he actually started shooting people, he realized it wasn't as he thought it was. And then he was subdued by his own mind, thinking like, okay, I'm just going to turn myself in. He's talking about how the race mixing thing here. One thing with race mixing that's always been kind of strange and odd to me is like when people talk about Europe in this sense, oh, we're Europeans, we have this European identity. It's like, do they not understand history? Just 1940s, there was a world war where white Europeans were killing other white Europeans all across the world and involving other people involved in the situation. Yes, China and Japan and things like that were also involved. Korea was involved in it. But when he's talking about Europeans, is he talking about the Russians? Is he talking about the Germans? Is he talking about everyone, Italians? Even though I don't know what his ethnicity is or what his genetics would be from, where his people were from when they came over from Europe to the United States of America, what people have been involved in, if he's done a 23andMe thing. How come he's like, okay, this is Europe now? Europe itself is not united. So why is he uniting this to this white identity? That's the identity I don't really understand. I kind of get, it might be similar to like the black people's identity in the United States of America, where they were removed from different locations on the western coast of Africa, and they don't really have the connections back to the traditions and cultures that they have. Maybe they're starting to build those back up, so it's just black. They kind of just have this new identity there. And I was also saying with the identity of white, I think is a uniquely American identity. It's a uniquely Northern American identity, where I think they also had some more of a detachment from their old cultures and things like that. Someone doesn't consider themselves Germanic that much, or German or Austrian American, but white, because they also don't have that farther connection. Whereas you have people like here in Kenya, people still consider themselves of a certain tribe, because they can, in many cases, it's my parents' generation or the generation before that that actually moved to Nairobi, where you're not living, where your people and the language and the foods and the area and the climates and the traditions have been going back probably since the first like missing link development of humans. Okay, the Bantu people did move around Africa a bit in those areas, but it's fucking centuries living in the same area. So they have those connections. A lot of Europeans, most of these people, yes, there was a lot of people being moved around during these major wars that occurred in Europe. But for a while, these European countries have maintained their kind of cultural and mostly genetic identity at that point. This whole idea of race mixing. The Scandinavians are different people from the Iberians, from the Caucasians, from the Greek people, from the people in. You go to a place like Italy, if you've actually lived in that area, if you know people who actually lived in that area, ask them. This people in northern Italy are very different culturally wise, or rather different culturally wise, than the people in southern Italy. They're not really the best of friends. There's parts of the reasons why there was principalities and these kind of things and names and things that you could tell the regions that people from the dialects, from the foods they eat. So this whole idea that there's this one European cultural identity that is this one race that we're going to protect and keep up, it's a falsehood in my opinion. I've seen the divisions that they have in there. Do I think we can overcome these divisions? Do I think there are things that can completely like prevent people from dealing with each other? No. Having these conversations, having these talks, having this ability, having these mixing of ideas, and not necessarily just the genetic aspect of it, is part of what I think is going to move the world forward in a way. And maybe that world war situation is something that made some Europeans kind of think these divisions that we have, at least within Europe, let's kind of tamp them down and see if we can build a closer identity. But I don't think the identity of white is that strong in Europe as some Americans seem to think that it is, or seem to imply that it is. Because like I said, like the Russians are as white as the Anglo-Saxons in Britain, in their definition, right? So are these people saying those are the same kind of people? When I say those two groups of people and other groups within these areas are very different. Like the Georgians themselves are not really that comfortable. Like, is there a problem if Ukraine gets taken over by Russia? If it's just white people, is there an issue there? I don't know if this guy would consider there to be an issue there, but I bet a lot of Ukrainians would find that to be an issue. Okay, so when you talk about that, shameless race mixtures, talking about the as you can see, this is a mess of things. And as I mentioned, I was thinking there's going to be some things he said here where I've had conversations with people. You can probably look back in my videos and see that there's some videos where I've discussed some of these things. I've had conversations with people, both in the political left and political right, people who are libertarian, people who don't really discuss these things. But these are topics and things that are in the media, political landscape of the world, especially in the United States of America, which I have a lot of focus in, and probably a lot of the people on this channel listen to this video will be aware of hearing some of these things. The bottom here, as you mentioned, the media will get to a point where they'll start saying, oh, this is a white supremacist. And he says he's not a white supremacist. And I talked about this thing. There's a difference between being racial and racist. Racial is just like having a preference. I think something like saying, okay, if I have a preference, if somebody comes up to me, a black person comes up to me and they say, oh, I have a preference for black women who are like, for fit black women over any other race. I don't want to marry an Asian. I really don't want to date white people. Is that a racist thing for a black man? Somebody who grew up in maybe Brooklyn, let's say some inner city area in Brooklyn, has been raised around black women his whole life, black American, multi-generation black American people, descendants of slaves, and that's his whole culture, that's his whole identity, and he's like, I'm just more attracted to black women. Would that be racist if he's not attracted to white women as much as he is black women? I don't think that would be racist. That would be racial. But maybe if you say he has a preference for black women by virtue of them having those genes, it's kind of weird how you get into that situation. So having a preference, I don't necessarily think is necessarily racist. Although by definition it says when you make a decision based off of somebody's genes. Okay, so let me know what you guys think about that. Do you think this guy is a white supremacist? As he said, the media is going to say that. He doesn't identify as a white supremacist. And a lot of people on the political left, some people on the political left, are into the whole identitarian type of IDs of politics where somebody can be like, I identify as a female, or I identify as an XYZ, so you have to call me this, I'm this, like regardless of what my genetics are. Regardless of what my actions are, if I identify as this, you have to treat me as this. So if this person just doesn't identify as a white supremacist, but he says things that maybe other white supremacists say, then should he have the right to be identified as he wants to identify himself as? As he said this is before Trump's rhetoric. As I mentioned, some of the political things that he's talked about here, like automation and things like that, are things I've seen on the political left. There's things that have definitely been on the political right here. My death is likely inevitable. I think he will be killed. Capital punishment is definitely something that I foresee in his future. Cultural diversity diminishes as stronger, more appealing cultures overtake weaker and more undesirable ones. I have some discussion wondering with this, like what is it about the American society, American culture, that you have a situation where there's vocal Americans, in vocal groups of Americans in the United States of America who are actually out there burning the flag, detesting the flag. The Democratic presidential elections, presidential debates, don't even have the American flag shown on stage. And you're like, are they running? What country are these people running for again? And then you have that situation there. Yet you have people in Hong Kong, right now in Hong Kong, which is a protectorate or it's part of, it was given back to China to be kind of ran by China. By the British, I think 20 or 30 years ago or something like that. That was handed back over to China. And there have been protests, ongoing protests for quite some time, maybe at least a couple of weeks now. And they just showed that some of these protesters have taken up the American flag, the current American flag, as part of their freedom. It's a sign of freedom for them. So why is it this American idea, the things that are in the Constitution, why has that been adopted by people? That has carried over, and it was a good idea. It's a positive idea that has spread around the world. And for some people in Hong Kong, they're using it as a sign of freedom. Yet you have some people in the United States of America considering it to be a sign of oppression. And what are their actions like? These people, they truly hate America? And I don't want to say people hate America, because I think if you hated a place, you would actually just leave that place. If you really thought this was the worst place in the world or worse than other places, you actually would find ways to leave. But these people are more content with this signaling that they think it's bad and staying. And then I guess some of them are vocal enough in trying to change these things and activate in different ways. This has just it's been a bit of a frustrating read. It's been a long read. Definitely thanks for watching the video so far. A lot in my mind from thinking about this stuff and reading these things. And there's some things I've missed, some things I might touch on later. I just think when you have something like this, you get to hear a lot of people discuss things and talk about it and give their opinion on it. And for me, I wanted to see what the person said. And I think it's positive to wait and see. Now that you've heard me read this, I'll leave a link to it. You can read it on your own. And also try to see what other people say about it. Because this person has said things that other people have said and acted in different ways. Yet he acted in the way he did off of these things that other people have talked about. People have observed things, and he absorbed those things, and he decided to solve this. I have to do this. Why do people see these same things and then say it's not an issue, or it's an issue, or I should encourage these people to do these things, or I shouldn't encourage these people to do these things? I should vote for these policies. I should be against that. I should want this to happen. I should want that to happen. Why are people going to see this situation and choose to comment on the situation without reading the manifesto? Or why would people read the manifesto and then focus on certain parts of this manifesto and leave out other parts? How much of the things that he said in here have you thought of yourself or agree with? Which are the things you disagree with? Do you think he's more on the political right, on the political left? Where do you think he stands in this kind of situation? And my advice to you is, I agree, as he says here, America can't, I mean, people think this fight is over. And once you define what the United States of America is, I had a video talking about how would you define the United States of America if it was a cereal. You know, in the cereal box, they have this simple thing where, yes, there's all the ingredients. If you read it, there could be a bunch of ingredients. But there's a main thing that says a part of a meal, then it has like corn, fiber, like it gives you just a few things, a few quick main things that are the selling point, that are the core of this product or of this item. What are those core things that you think the United States of America stands for, the United States of America is? That if it was no longer these things, it would no longer be the United States of America. I think if you can define that, then you can start saying, how are those things being hurt? How are those things being damaged? How can those things be maintained? And I can't imagine too many of those things or any of those things that most people would decide, for me to maintain that, I need to go out and shoot people. Because as he said here again, he's talking about, I can't think of shooting fellow Americans. He went to a Walmart and shot a whole bunch of Americans. They said there was 3 Mexican nationals that were shot, but he seemed to be randomly shooting at people. He shot at Americans as well too. So was he asking for ID and saying, are you American? He's talked about people who've lived in the United States of America for long amounts of time. We need to divide people into different races. Who's going to actually pick these divisions? As he talked about already, there's already been racial mixing. He's against racial mixing. There's been tribal mixing in himself. That's why they have to have this identity of white to be this overreaching identity so he can ignore the different cultures and very opposing cultures and mindsets that mixed in Europe for many chances to lead to him to be who he is at this point. There's different tribes that happened in Europe that have those identities, and as I talked about, you go to certain places in Europe and they still have these very strong tribal identities, cultural identities of a lot smaller communities than people think in this whole national idea. So it's been a mess reading this stuff. Thanks for watching the video. Like, share, and subscribe. I'll probably talk about some of these things, as I said, in later videos. And goodbye.